Excellent. Hello and welcome. This is Alex Cave with a condensed version of my presentation on using virtual reality as an assessment tool. Now, of course, virtual reality is used primarily in gaming, but one way I like to think of its future applications is how print allowed us to disseminate information, radio helped us to share a message, TV, you could spread a vision. VR is going to allow us to share experiences with other people. Now, training and assessment go hand in hand. Training for applications outside of entertainment is primarily where VR has been used within clinical, medical, and special education training. But they're really two sides of the same coin. And what's been observed is transference, which really is whatever skills were obtained in a training simulation, can they transfer to the real world applications? And there's been mixed results for that. Some studies have been inconclusive. Results have never been negative, but in one study, VR did provide better transference than video training, even though that video training was preferred by participants. And what's the real power of virtual reality is the ecological validity that comes with it, and that's the degree of relevance a test has relative to the real world. So if you're going to be, people live in 3 dimensions, they move in 3 dimensions, so when you're training and or assessing people, why not do the same in a similar environment? So some of the studies that have been done compare using virtual reality to pen and paper tests, and in those studies, virtual reality has been shown to be much more effective. One such example is Kim et al., where they looked at unilateral neglect, in which a person's eyesight on one side may be impaired due to brain damage on the opposite hemisphere of the brain. And instead of doing cancellation tasks where someone's told, in this paper full of words, cross out all of a certain word, they were instead put into a simulation where they had to track a sphere in a 3-dimensional space. And how well they were able to track that, moving their head, moving their eyes, you had much more control over the difficulty of that simulation, as well as being able to get a lot more valuable data from those tests, and it's much more ecologically valid. They're going to be tracking stuff in real life in 3 dimensions, moving their head, moving their eyes simultaneously, and so the test itself is much more valid. Immersion is that sense of presence that comes with the suspension of disbelief, and through improved video, 360 audio, and haptic feedback, we're ever increasingly being able to create better immersive environments and situations. And so that plays into that ecological validity. The more immersive it is, the more ecological validity you get. This is a video on just how realistic some modern game engines are able to be. But for the sake of brevity, I'm going to move on. If you'd like to see it, this entire presentation will be made available. So with performing or using virtual reality as an assessment tool, there's a lot of different measures that can be obtained, including biofeedback, such as heart rate, voice amplitude and pitch, heat mapping, when and where they're looking within the environment, eye tracking, completion time, errors, etc. And what I'm proposing is that while while VR has often, or within its lifespan, it's often been used for teaching or assessing technical skills, I believe that there's room for creating testing for latent factors on the soft side. So putting someone in an immersive environment and acquiring biofeedback as well as parameters within the test, the assessment scenario itself, that we can take this data and, using software analysis, test for these latent factors. So testing, and some research has already been done on this, most particularly in regards to someone's attention and measuring focused attention, sustained attention, selective, alternating, or divided attention, and for memory, between iconic, working, procedural, declarative, prospective, and episodic. And being able, different tasks and jobs require different types of attention and memory, or combinations of them, and so putting people in those environments and then being able to assess how they rank within those domains. And rather than performing all of these analysis manually, as is currently the case, and which is time intensive and therefore more cost intensive, I propose that a lot of these can be analyzed via software and cut down on time and cost. For one measure, this is Microsoft's Azure Emotions API, in which you can take video and it will code someone's emotional state, and you also get a confidence rating of how sure the algorithm is of the emotion that it's detected. And this already exists, so you start to couple this with some of the other measurements that you can acquire, put them all on a time map, and you should be able to see someone's emotional states along with everything else over the course of the entire test, not just at discrete moments. You'll be able to have that too, but see how someone transitions, how quickly they transition from one state to the next. And again, moving on, I'm not going to show the video, but some of the strengths of this is you have reliability. You build the assessment, it's going to be the same for each and every person who goes through that assessment, that environment, rather than if you have different actors come in on different days, or everything will be exactly the same and you have complete control over that environment. You have the ecological validity. It's totally reusable. You just continue to cycle people through the assessment, and it can become more widely available to more employees within an organization. It's scalable. As soon as a company has the hardware, either they purchase it or they could lease it, then all they have to do is download the situation that's designed specifically to test whatever latent factors are of interest to the company. And some of the current weaknesses and challenges is upfront cost, particularly within development. As hardware costs are dropping, it does take a team of people to put together to build those environments, and also to test that those scenarios are in fact valid in regards to whatever factors are trying to be measured. So the upfront cost is going to be is a challenge, but that's the case with any software company. That sunk cost initially is always on the front end, and then on the long end, on that long tail, that's where licensing out, you can have that's where the revenue and profit comes in. But there's also going to be an IT learning curve. If companies can tweak or do this in-house on their own, then you're going to have to teach the already existing IT teams how to manage or make those alterations as needed by the company. Moving forward, establishing validity. Some of the tests I would like to run is build a very simple simulation and prove that it's valid for whatever the factor is, but then using that test against the hardware. So test that same exact test. Does the validity of that drop as the resolution drops, as the audio quality drops, as the rendering drops, and test to make sure what parts are most important within a scenario and establish what those cutoffs are, specifically on the hardware side, and what measures are valid what combinations of measurements are valid for drawing conclusions on the factors that are going to be measured, and then standardizing those latent factors as they're measured in different scenarios. Modularity is going to be something key. So as you build one scenario, being able to maybe have that same scenario but within different locations, that would provide modularity for decreasing development times while maintaining ecological validity across different industries. And the potential for NPC interactions, or otherwise non-playable characters. It's a term from gaming, but not everyone's going to need to just interact with tracking a ball within an organization. Ideally, you're going to have people observing or interacting with other avatars and defining exactly what that interaction is going to be and how that's going to be built into the simulation, whether there is going to be another actor role-playing as that avatar. That remains to be determined. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to have a conversation with another avatar, unless down the road being able to couple it with something similar to Google Duplex, which is essentially a voice assistant that Google recently announced. However, it can carry on a far more natural conversation with a human than has been seen advanced conversational AI that's been released or showcased to the public thus far. So then you may actually be able to have this avatar or series of avatars in which the assessee is interacting with all of them, say in a board meeting, and each one of those is independently responding to each other as well as to the assessor, and you've essentially replaced any actors that are needed for this simulation. For future improvements, adding in that voice recognition technology and coupling it with the environment so that some of these assessments can be done from afar. They don't require actors or observers. Everything can just be done electronically. And building out the tools for development, ease of use, all-in-one hardware solutions and packages, and again, that real-time remote acting. This is an example of that. This is Siren, and she is a avatar that was powered through a motion capture suit of an actress in real time. So this was simply to demonstrate what's possible in the near future. And in the near future, I would make the argument that this will be applicable to nearly everything. So some of the instances that I thought of was for even stuff like driving tests. So rather than putting new drivers on the road or having the elderly, we can assess should you be driving yet without actually getting them out on the road. Some of this has already been being done for surgery, as well as police and military applications. In one study I read, people were using it for prescription drug diagnosis. But what I'm really excited about is the potential to, again, measure and assess against those soft skills. So measuring someone's conscientiousness, empathy, patience, leadership. Those are the types of things that tend to be much more difficult rather than mechanical or technical skills to measure and assess. And I think that that's where the real opportunity is to be had with this. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at cavealix, that's CAVEALIX, at gmail.com. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have and or potentially collaborate with you. Thank you so much.